What happens to your money if you pass away without a nominee and without informing your family about your investments? The money remains unclaimed. At the end of February this year, nearly 35,000 crore rupees was lying as unclaimed deposits in over 10.2 crore accounts in various banks across the country. Now, it was 48,000 crore last year, so slightly less this year, but still a very significant amount. Now, not just bank account, it is said that 24,000 crore was also lying unclaimed in mutual funds as per a paper released by the Association of Registered Investment Advisors. Imagine all that money and nobody to claim it. Such is the concern around these unclaimed deposits that the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman asked regulators to initiate a special drive to settle unclaimed deposits within the banks and financial institutions as soon as possible. On the show today, where does this money go and what can regulators do to identify the recipients? Joining us at this point in time is Ankit Garg, founder of Garg Law Chambers. Also with us at this point in time is Srinath Sridharan. Before we come to you, gentlemen, let us quickly play the bite of Finance Minister when she spoke to media just a couple of days ago. Okay, we don't have that bite at this point in time. So we're going to straight away jump into this very interesting topic of unclaimed deposits, 32,000 crore lying in the banks at this point in time. What happens to this money, Ankit?
For having me. So primarily it is important to understand what is unclaimed deposits. People generally have money lying in their bank accounts, that may be current account or savings account, and also in any term deposit or fixed deposits. When this money or when this account is not operated for a period of 10 years, it is called as dormant and inactive. The money lying in such an account is transferred under the RBI regulations to a fund called DEAF, that is the Depositor Education and Awareness Fund. So all this money gets transferred to the RBI, as was clarified by their February notification that 32,000 crore worth of amount is lying with the RBI.
Okay. The money goes to the RBI and is never claimed back, because obviously the claimants don't really know that there is certain amount of money that's been parked in various banks by our immediate family members. What is the role of regulators and banks specifically, before I go to the role of regulators, in informing possible claimants of this money?
To be honest, there is no such regulation in which the banks are, mandated to reach out to the account holders or the nominees. Banks do not get to know when a person passes away, leaving behind certain accounts whereby money is contained.
But banks do know that this is unclaimed deposit.
They do. Whatever information banks have, for example, the registered address of the account holder, banks do send communication to the account holders so that they get in touch with the bank. But what happens in most of the cases is that people have moved their addresses and the new addresses are not updated with the bank. So in such a scenario, that money stays idle and then gets transferred to the RBI after a period of 10 years.
Okay. But Srinath, I think that's exactly where the problem is, and that is where the Finance Minister has also talked about, hoping to start a special drive where banks and regulators can in fact identify a possible claimant of this money, and this is a huge amount.
Yeah, that's true, but if you look at the historic perspective, a lot of these bank KYC norms did not have full details. Today you have the linkages to PAN, Aadhaar, mobile numbers, email IDs, and the outreach from the banks to customers. I mean, they can't give any excuse that it is expensive to reach out to the customer has moved homes. I mean, today, if you want to do WhatsApp banking, send a WhatsApp message in whatever language, the Indian languages, to the customer, it is possible. So I think I look at it as a proactive step, as one-time cleanup. And what will be interesting is if we get into the granular details, if at some point RBI will publish, will be to figure out how much of these deposits are less than 1 lakh rupees, less than 10,000 rupees, what are the actual tenure of these deposits. That will be interesting, right? We have a very transient urban migration pattern, right? People move from between cities for jobs. And if, let's say, they had some surplus money and they put in a money FD for 2 years and they moved homes and they forgot it. So that could be a money lying there. So we'll have to figure out the root cost analysis, and about 34,000 crore is not a small amount of money. But I also read between the lines slightly more. Why is it this sudden interest that we have picked up on unclaimed deposits, what we did not do all these years? It is not about financial stability of the system at all. I think it is more about consumer confidence in fixed deposits, of saying that the banks are the last bastion where your money is safe, and we will do this. Insurance regulator did the similar exercise of asking insurance companies to go back and repay deposits, unclaimed monies that were lying with them, with insurance companies over a point in time. And I think banking regulator is following suit here.
Okay. Apart from consumer confidence in banks, there's another underlying reason, and that is the fact that there is not much awareness around will, there's not much awareness around inheritance, and that has in fact led to soaring high numbers. And as you mentioned, this has been traditionally a problem, 48,000 crore last year, 32,000 crore this year, which means that more and more people are now getting more aware, but that is not enough. The awareness at this point in time about will, nomination, inheritance is not enough.
See, that's true. I mean, while we have innovated for a lot of digital public goods, some of these processes, bank processes, are so frustrating, right? I mean, we have a classic case of what is frustrating in the last couple of months has been this entire the safety locker agreements. I mean, what the banks forced all the safety locker clients to sign as revised agreement. And again, they said now RBI has changed those processes and we'll have to redo those. So I think we'll have to figure out what are those simplistic terms and processes can we do. Financial literacy is also about simplifying processes. Unfortunately, we still have that legacy of baggage of, queues, and we want to actually put customers in a queue. If you have digital, can you simplify it? And yes, I think we can simplify it with this entire thing. The wills, the nomination, what SEBI did, right? I mean, SEBI recently asked for every single mutual fund holder to say that who's your nomination, or say opt out. So I think some of these are also about financial literacy. We need common grounds, all financial regulators to come have a common ground. We can't have a scenario where SEBI, IRDA, RBI have different rules or different thinking on some of these. A common ground where if you can link it to DigiLocker, if you can link it to KYC, if you can link it to mobile phones, and I think we can simplify a lot of these succession issues. But then, how are we going to fix the legal process? If today you have to probate a will, it's a 7 to 9 or probably 10-month process. How many people can actually afford this? So can we simplify succession planning of common Indians? I think that's a larger challenge, not just about banks.
So Srinath, I remember a long time back, maybe 2.5 years ago, you'd written this beautiful column on Money9 around succession planning and writing a will. And it got us thinking back then also, but I think what I really want to understand from you is, typically if you look at the balance sheet of a bank, any deposit which is lying with a bank is technically a liability of the bank, right?
Correct.
So at some point, the rightful owner needs to be repatriated with the liability that the bank has on its books. So is it fair for banks, despite fairly stringent KYC norms, with multiple reminders to update, link your PAN, link your Aadhaar, link your phone number, and this whole jam trinity also, which made enormous headlines for the last 7-8 years. Now, is it unfair to expect the bank to actually find the rightful owner of a dormant account, and in the case of that rightful owner not alive anymore, a deceased rightful owner, the next of kin, the nominee, those details should not be very hard to find given the amount of KYC that goes into opening and maintaining a bank account?
See, it's not as easy as it sounds, Karthik. I mean, the last 5 years or so, we have all these mobile numbers being encoded into even the application forms of fixed deposits. So there is a way of the banks to reach out. What if somebody had deposited some money in the physical form 10 years ago, and there was no mobile phone number given, there was a landline given? So the challenge for a lot of banks is they would claim, and I'm talking about largely the public sector banks, they would go by the process and say, we made 3 calls, nobody picked up the call, and that's it. Or send a chitty to that letter. But if you are talking about actually using technology, artificial intelligence, social media to trawl, saying that, hey, this is the name, this is the number, this is the address, is an outcome possible? Probably. Some of the private banks and private insurance companies do this to reach out. But is it of importance to them, or will they take the easier route by saying that I accumulated this in my balance sheet and now I've given it to RBI, my work is done? I think that is where this messaging from the minister and RBI seems to be, saying that you take accountability of returning that money to the customer. Okay. And is it difficult? Probably no. In the new age digital era, not at all. But let me ask you the flip question. How many times actually have you had a WhatsApp coming from your bank talking about your account, your credits you get, because that's easier SMS. But what about your FD reminders? Do you get it on your WhatsApp?
Yeah,
Whereas
you're
every
right.
bank today in India claims to be digital banking, all that. None of them do
True.
because it is about thinking and revisiting their processes. They
True.
still expect you to go to the branch. Most of the banks, public
Where
sector
they can
banks, don't
upsell
even have.
something else to you. Where in addition to renewing the FD, they upsell another product to you, which may or may not be financially
Absolutely,
viable.
absolutely. So I think while we call it digital bank, it's a sham of getting you physically to that branch.
Yeah, but I have one more concern, Srinath. Now what happens is now the government is saying they're going to create this portal and it's going to put on display all the unclaimed deposits, and then through a process, the rightful owners or inheritors could claim that money back. My experience with, let's say, a government-run EPFO portal has been fairly horrid, if I can say it on air, right? I somehow don't have confidence in these digital portals really going ahead and simplifying the process of claiming unclaimed deposits. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, I do agree with you, but I will add another layer of complication. What
Okay.
if I did not even know that I had an unclaimed deposit?
Yeah.
So by you publicizing that portal has no relevance to me. And what if I have changed 3 houses in 10 years? I mean, a typical classic tech-based services
Yeah. Yeah. Or
professionals
cities
role,
or
right?
even countries for that matter.
Correct. So how do you even know which bank, which branch, and people today, or the last 15 years, as we have seen, every company has a salary account with a different bank.
Yeah.
So average services professional with 15 years of experience would have at least 3 to 4 bank accounts, and they would have changed branches as well. How do
Correct.
you expect them to remember, hey, 16 years ago, I lived in Bangalore and I probably have 1 lakh rupees here? Not
Right.
possible. And I think we'll have to go farther than this. And I think while this is a great exercise of sending confidence, but I think the accountability for banks now to increase their KYC has to increase. Otherwise, what's the point in having a name and an address where you send a chitty and it comes back and you'll say, I attempted, but nothing worked? Great. It's
Okay.
all over.
Let's get Ankit in. He's been dealing with some of these claimant issues and he's been dealing with some of these claimants who've been struggling to get their money back. How tardy or tedious is the process at this point in time, Ankit, to get your money back? And the portal that the ministry is hoping to form, is that going to put things in order?
Well, we hope so. The portal is still in the pipeline. There is no concrete roadmap. RBI did come out that they will combine the database of all the banks and provide it on a central platform. So we are hoping that that platform will give not just the details of the account holder, but also the amount of money pending. Because to do this exercise, one needs to first have an idea of how much amount is pending. That will determine the roadmap a legal heir will have to follow. For example, in terms of shares, if the value of certain shares are less than 5 lakh rupees, there is a simpler process to claim inheritance. Whereas, in terms of banks, there are separate limits for separate banks. There is no centralized limit provided by the RBI. All the boards of the banks provide, separate limits. For example, 10 lakhs for one bank and 20 lakhs for the other bank.
So are you suggesting that even if I can claim up to 20 lakh, the limit is 10 lakh and that's all the money I'm going to get from the bank?
No, I am suggesting the legal process to be undertaken by the legal heirs is different when the amount crosses a certain threshold. If the deceased left a will, they will have to apply for a probate. If they passed away intestate, they will have to apply for a succession certificate or a letter of administration.
And that's where things get complicated?
Yes, courts in India, as you are aware, it takes time and costs to reach the court and bring all the legal heirs on board so that they can come to the court and decide who amongst the legal heirs want to claim back that money.
Okay. So I want to put across a case scenario here, and in this case, assuming that my parents left certain amount for me and I'm not aware of that amount and that money is parked with the banks, what is the rightful recourse for me as a legal claimant of that money if there was no will left?
Well, if there is no will left and you are the sole legal heir, the first thing will be to check your parental records, approach their chartered accountant to get some idea of which banks and which accounts were maintained by your parents. Then you will have to individually write to the bank branches to find out the current balances of the bank by providing a death certificate. a legal heir certificate declaring that you are the legal heir, as well as your KYC proof, for example, your Aadhaar card and PAN card. Once the bank is satisfied that you are the genuine legal heir, they will disclose the details, how much amount of money is lying with their banks. Then, according to the quantum of money, you have to undertake the legal process of inheritance.
Okay. So the process in itself is a punishment, Karthik.
Totally. And these are 10 crore accounts that we are talking about. The number is huge. I mean, of course, the volume, if you take the mean, it's 3,500 rupees that we are talking about. But my assumption is that there would be bank accounts which will have a far larger value than 3,500 rupees in them. And then if that is the kind of paperwork required and if the portal is going to be tardy, I think at some level, I'm not sure how this is actually going to implement and find its way to the rightful owners. It's going to be a complex journey, no doubt.
Okay.
And becomes all the more complex when you're talking about mutual funds as a product category or even insurance as a product category now. It becomes more complex with those instruments than possibly pure cash or fixed deposits.
Okay. And you know, that brings us to the larger question around wills and inheritance. There is a lack of systemic knowledge, especially amongst middle class. I haven't in my lifetime come across many people who leave a proper will behind, and maybe Srinath can also point to us because he's been writing about will and inheritance. Srinath, what sort of knowledge do we have in our society at present at the moment regarding wills and inheritance? Because although we all know how important it is so as to not leave behind a family that is squabbling for your wealth, but the understanding is very, very limited.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, when it comes to personal finance and legal issues around personal finance, I think the awareness is very, very poor. I mean, I would probably say 99% of middle class India is not aware of personal finance and planning, and planning includes the legal aspects of it at all. And more conversations we have, we almost feel, and I think there's a social sentiment around it. For us, the word death is a very morbid word. We don't want to discuss anything after somebody. And I think that's a challenge. And our generation, for example, is very open about it, saying that, hey, you built something in your lifetime and you want to keep it. And I think especially after COVID, there's a wake-up call, right? I mean, age or religion or whatever your background didn't matter. I mean, we lost a lot of our family and friends across society. So why is it that it's important to talk about succession plan? Why is it important to talk about your personal finances? I mean, I won't be surprised if, let's say, you run a research poll asking even CXOs in India, saying how many of them actually openly discuss their finances with their spouse. And I'm saying it in public, a hypothesis that 50% of them or over that might say they don't discuss finances with their wife.
And very interesting you pointed that out, Srinath. We were just having this discussion in the newsroom right before the show, me and my colleague discussing how they don't, people in general don't like to discuss their financials with their spouses, and that perhaps leaves
financial transparency and opacity.
Absolutely. So there's absolute opacity when it comes to finances. Perhaps I think the big takeaway for me from this discussion is that be less opaque, be more transparent regarding your finances, especially with your spouses, with your family members if you can, or you will leave more unclaimed money with the banks, and it will basically go to RBI and go to government coffers at large. Hopefully the money will be utilized towards a drive where there is more financial literacy about unclaimed deposits among people in this country. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us. Srinath, Ankit, for your input on that very important story.